Welcome to Shuffle Source. I'm your host Brandon, and today we are back with another Commander Precon upgrade video. This time we will be upgrading the Dance of the Elements Precon from Lorwyn Eclipsed. Let's get into it. Really fast, before going over the commander we will be using, let's quickly go over the Precon upgrade format that we use here at Shuffle Source. The first item to note is that we will either use the primary or the backup commander from the deck. Next, we have a cap of around $100 or less that we use when choosing the upgrades. We will be adding 10 cards and we will be removing 10 cards. Additionally, we add a few more upgrades that we like to call no budget options near the end of the video. And those are for people who may already have the cards or maybe have a little bit extra in their budget to spend. And lastly, we do use market value pricing provided by TCG Player at the time of recording, which will be displayed at the bottom of the screen as we discuss the cards. The commander we will be discussing today is Ashling the Limitless. For 2 in a red, we have a 2/3 legendary creature elemental sorcerer that says, elemental spells you cast from your hand have evoke 4. If you cast a spell for its evoke cost, it's sacrificed when it enters. Whenever you sacrifice a non-token elemental, create a token that's a copy of it. That token gains haste until end of turn. At the beginning of your next end step, sacrifice it unless you pay Wooburg. So Ashling is a Wooburg elemental focused commander that revolves around evoking powerful elementals for their strong enter the battlefield's effects, or in some cases their leave the battlefield effects. Elemental creatures tend to have very useful or powerful ETB effects, and many of them already have evoke. So that way you have the flexibility of either casting them for their full cost and keeping the body, or just evoking them for the cheaper cost to get the ETB ability and then sacrifice the creature. The problem is that not all of the best elementals actually have evoke, and that's where Ashling comes in. Ashling gives all of our elemental creature spells evoke 4, which will let us pay any color of mana we want to get those ETB effects immediately. Now, normally sacrificing a creature could be seen as a downside, but Ashling's second ability turns that into an upside by creating a hasty token copy of any non-token elemental that we sacrifice. When that token then enters, we will get the ETB effect again, and then in the next end step, we have the opportunity to pay Wooburg to keep that token around permanently. So because we're effectively doubling our ETB effects from elementals, this deck is capable of very explosive turns. And we will do that by adding more elementals with strong enter the battlefield effects, providing ways to discount the evoke or full casting cost of our elementals, and adding cheaper and better ways to keep our elemental tokens. A special thanks to all of our channel members. Your support truly means a lot and we greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to show your support and get access to some exclusive perks, consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button below. You can also support the channel by liking, subscribing, and dropping a comment. Thank you, and now let's get back to the video. So we've now made it to the first of our additions. We have Champion of the Path. For 3 colorless and 1 red, we have a 7/3 creature elemental sorcerer. As an additional cost to cast this spell, behold an elemental and exile it. Exile an elemental you control or an elemental card from your hand. Whenever another elemental you control enters, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. When this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exile card to its owner's hand. So Champion of the Path is a huge payoff for the sheer number of elementals that will be entering the battlefield with this deck. It's important to note that this card cares about entering and not casting. So if you evoke an elemental and then copy it with Ashling, that's 2 separate elementals entering, which means 2 instances of the damaging ability to each opponent. With some of the high power elementals we're running, this can very quickly turn into a win condition if Champion of the Path can stick around. The exile cost is really a small price to pay for the upside it gives. If you exile an elemental from your hand, you'll just get it back whenever the Champion of the Path leaves the battlefield, and ideally what you're going to be doing is just exiling one of Ashling's elemental tokens that were going to be sacrificed anyway. Our next addition is Flamekin Harbinger. For 1 red, we have a 1/1 creature elemental shaman that says, when Flamekin Harbinger enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an elemental card. Reveal it, then shuffle your library and put that card on top. So Flamekin Harbinger is a very cheap tutor that lets us search our library for any elemental and put it on top. So this card gives us access to the toolbox of elementals that we have and lets us find exactly what piece we need for any situation. Now that being said, Flamekin Harbinger really isn't an elemental we're looking to evoke and copy because the ability of the card shuffles before putting the card on top. So copying that ETB ability would just shuffle the tutored card back into the deck. So this card is definitely here for the consistency and to help us set up future explosive turns. Here we have Nesting Dovehawk for 3 colorless and 1 white. We have a 2/2 creature bird that has flying. At the beginning of combat on your turn, populate. Create a token that's a copy of a creature token you control. Whenever a creature token enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Nesting Dovehawk. Now, I know this is not an elemental, but we definitely want to make an exception for Nesting Dovehawk. This card is here to help us turn Ashling's temporary elemental tokens into permanent ones. At the beginning of combat, it populates, which means we get to copy one of the elemental tokens before it would normally be sacrificed at the next instep. That effectively lets us keep a copy of that elemental token without having to pay the 5 color cost. And since those tokens are copies, we will still get all of their enter the battlefield effects again. So this card is just a great way to get additional ETB effects out of our elementals, and it's a cost-effective way to keep our tokens around. Next up, we have Redirect Lightning for 1 red. We have an instant lesson that says, as an additional cost to cast the spell, pay 5 life or pay 2 colorless. Change the target of target spell or ability with a single target. So Ashling's abilities are very strong, and because of that, she can be a lightning rod for removal. So because of this, we want to make sure that we include some cost-effective protection. Redirect Lightning is great because it will allow us to redirect a single target spell or ability to another target, all while giving us some flexibility on the casting cost depending on our situation. Sometimes paying the 5 life and 1 red is a small price to pay for keeping Ashling around. Other times you may have the mana and paying the 2 additional and a red isn't a big deal. Since this deck relies heavily on our commander and key elemental creatures, having cheap, flexible protection like this goes a long way to making sure our engine sticks around. And here we have Renewed Solidarity for 2 colorless and 1 white. We have an enchantment that says, as this enchantment enters, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+0. At the beginning of your end step, for each token you control of the chosen type that entered this turn, create a token that's a copy of it. So similar to Nesting Dovehawk, this is a really great card to add to this deck because it will reward us for creating those elemental creature tokens that we will be creating with Ashling. Additionally, naming elemental when this card hits the battlefield will give our board a small power boost. However, the real value of this card is definitely that end step trigger. Every elemental token that entered this turn will get copied again, which means our temporary tokens now suddenly turn into permanent board presence, all without us having to pay WUBRG to keep them. Lastly, let's not forget that the tokens created by this card will enter as copies, which means they'll trigger any enter the battlefield abilities the original elemental had as well. Our next addition is Shroud Stomper for 3 colorless, 2 white, 2 black. We have a 5/5 creature elemental that has Death Touch. Whenever Shroud Stomper enters or attacks, each opponent loses 2 life, you gain 2 life, and draw a card. So at 7 mana, Shroud Stomper is not really one of the elementals that we want to be paying the full price for. Instead, this is a prime choice to be evoking out with Ashling because the value we get is insane. When it enters, each opponent will lose 2 life. We will then gain 2 life, and we will draw a card. It then sacrifices, Ashling creates a token copy, and we will get the entire trigger again. And then because the token has haste, we can immediately attack with it and trigger a 3rd time. So from a single cast, you're realistically getting 3 triggers from this. That's 18 total damage across 3 opponents, 6 each. You're going to gain 6 life and then draw 3 cards. Not to mention if the token sticks around, it will keep triggering its ability every time it attacks. This card is a great example of the explosive capability you have with this deck. Here we have Sunderflock for 7 and 2 blue. We have a 5/5 creature elemental that says this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest mana value among elementals you control. It also has flying, and when this creature enters, if you cast it, return all non-elemental creatures to their owner's hand. So 9 mana is incredibly expensive, but we're never paying Sunderflock's full mana cost in this deck. Whether it's from its own cost reduction ability, or us simply just evoking it out with Ashling, we're definitely never going to be paying that full price. So that last ability is really the star of the show here. Unless you're going up against another opponent playing elementals, this is effectively a one-sided board wipe in your favor. This card ends up playing very much like Raise the Palisades, clearing away all the non-elemental creatures. Then, because Ashling copies the Sacrifice Sunderflock, we're going to then get a hasty 5/5 flying token afterwards to immediately swing in on our opponents. Next, we have Sundial of the Infinite for 2 colorless. We have an artifact where you can pay 1 and tap it, end the turn. Activate this ability only during your turn. So Sundial of the Infinite is extremely important in this deck because it lets us keep Ashling's elemental token copies permanently. The way that works is whenever Ashling creates the token copy, it normally will get sacrificed at the next instep unless we pay that Wooburg cost. However, with Sundial, we can simply end the turn before that trigger resolves, which in turn means we get to keep the elemental token copy without having to pay that expensive cost. Next up is Twin Flame Travelers. For 2 colorless and a blue and a red, we have a 3/3 creature elemental sorcerer that has flying. If a triggered ability of another elemental you control triggers, it triggers an additional time. Twin Flame Travelers is a very strong addition to this deck. Since the deck is built around elementals with powerful ETB triggers, this effectively lets those abilities trigger an additional time. When you're already evoking elementals and copying them with Ashling, getting extra triggers on top of that can really get out of hand for your opponents very quickly. For example, with Ashling and Twin Flame Travelers out, a single evoked elemental with 1 ETB actually gives us a total of 6 ETB effects. 2 from the original creature, and then Ashling creates 2 token copies also, and each of them will also get their ETBs doubled as well. This card turns strong plays into absolutely game-breaking ones. And here we have the last of our additions. We have Urza's Incubator for 3 colorless. It is an artifact that says, as Urza's Incubator enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creature spells of the chosen type cost 2 less to cast. So Urza's Incubator is a huge efficiency boost for this deck. Naming Elemental makes all of our elemental creatures cost 2 less. Because evoking is a casting cost, this card will also reduce the evoke cost from Ashling's ability on the elementals that we evoke, meaning it will now only cost us 2 colorless instead of the 4 to get the elementals out. This allows us to chain multiple elementals in a single turn, and with Ashling on the board, being able to effectively double up on the ETB value that each elemental brings means that we can set up more explosive turns faster and more efficiently. Also, Ashling is also an elemental, so if later in the game you have to recast her, this will help offset some of the commander tax. We've now made it to the removals portion of the video, and we're going to kick things off with Bane of Progress. For 4 colorless and 2 green, we have a 2/2 creature elemental that says, when this creature enters, destroy all artifacts and enchantments. Put a +1/+1 counter on this creature for each permanent destroyed this way. So Bane of Progress is a decent card for clearing out artifacts and enchantments, but it's actually pretty awkward in this deck. We leverage a lot of our own artifacts and enchantments to accelerate our game plan and to really support Ashling's engine. Blowing up our own board can really set us back. Yes, you'll destroy your opponent's stuff as well, but ultimately the other part of the payoff here is just a large creature, which is not necessarily something we're prioritizing here. On top of that, creating another token copy of this with Ashling really doesn't help, because once this first ability resolves, there's really nothing left to destroy. So from an ETB value perspective, copying Bane of Progress is largely wasted, which makes it a poor fit for what the deck is trying to do. Our next removal is Elemental Spectacle. For 5 and a green, we have a sorcery that has Vivid. Create a number of 5/5 red and green elemental creature tokens equal to the number of colors among permanents you control. Then you gain life to the number of creatures you control. So I know this card looks flashy, but it really doesn't line up with what we're trying to do. At 6 mana, it has the potential to create a bunch of elemental tokens, but none of these tokens have any sort of enter the battlefield abilities, so they don't really interact with Ashling's Evoke and Sacrifice plan. Another issue with this card is how inconsistent it can be. Because of the Vivid mechanic, the number of tokens you create depends on how many colors you have among the permanents you control. That means there are plenty of situations where you're spending 6 mana and maybe only getting 1 or 2 elementals, which is not a great rate. Life gain is nice, but I'm not sure that this is significant enough to really matter. Here we have Footprints of the Stag for 1 and a white. We have a Kindred Enchantment Elemental. Whenever you draw a card, you may put a hoofprint counter on this enchantment. You can then pay 2 and a white, remove 4 hoofprint counters from this enchantment, create a 4/4 white elemental creature token with flying, activate only during your turn. So I know that this card at first glance may seem synergistic because it cares about card draw and making elementals, but in practice, it's just really too slow for this deck. It takes 4 separate instances of card draw and additional mana before you can ever get a single token. Not to mention, the token that enters doesn't have an ETB effect. This deck wants its elementals to generate value the moment they hit the battlefield, especially when we're evoking and copying them with Ashling. Compared to a lot of the cards we're adding, this is just a delayed payoff that doesn't meaningfully contribute to our plan. Next up is Gigantha the Wellspring. For 4 colorless and a hybrid red-green, we have a 5/5 legendary creature elemental elk. It has a companion ability. No card in your starting deck has more than one of the same mana symbol in its mana cost. It also has a tap ability where you can add Wooburg. This mana can't be spent to pay generic mana costs. Now I know this card might seem appealing at first because it makes all 5 colors and is an elemental, but in practice it really doesn't pull its weight here. The fact that the mana it produces can't pay for generic costs is a bit of a downside, considering a lot of the times we want to be evoking with Ashling's ability, which is 4 colorless. Sure, that mana can be used to pay for Ashling's second part of her ability to keep the elemental token copied during the end step, but we've added several much more efficient ways to do that. Lastly, it's important to consider that the first portion of the card really isn't relevant to us at all. We're not building around the companion restriction, so it's really just a 5 mana dork that's really getting outclassed by all of our other additions. Our next removal is Kindred Summons. For 5 and 2 green, we have an instant that says, choose a creature type. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal X creature cards of the chosen type, where X is the number of creatures you control of that type. Put those cards onto the battlefield, then shuffle the rest of the revealed cards into your library. So Kindred Summons is a powerful Kindred payoff, but it's better used in other decks. This card is very dependent on already having a wide board of elementals, and at 7 mana, it's really just a classic win more card for this particular deck. Because elementals are already a strong creature type, if we have enough elementals on the board to really maximize the potential of this card, we're probably already in a winning position. More importantly, this deck really isn't built around going wide like maybe elves would be. For the 7 mana, I would much rather just cast multiple strong elementals. Here's our next cut, Opal Palace. It is a land where you can tap it for a colorless, or you can pay 1 tap it, add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. If you spend this mana to cast your commander, it enters with a number of additional +1/+1 counters on it equal to the number of times it's been cast from the command zone this game. So Ashling isn't a commander that we're trying to grow with +1/+1 counters or really win through commander combat damage. She's an engine piece. Spending mana on a land to add +1/+1 counters to Ashling doesn't really help with the game plan of the deck, and because of that we're really not planning on swinging with her very often. On top of that, the land mostly just taps for colorless unless we want to invest extra mana into it to get the color we need. Next we have Shatter the Sky. For 2 and 2 white, we have a sorcery that says each player who controls a creature with power 4 or greater draws a card, then destroy all creatures. Now, while 4 mana for a board wipe is a very solid rate, we're cutting Shatter the Sky because we already have access to a better one-sided board wipe option through Sunderflock. Shatter the Sky destroys our creature and often gives our opponents cards, whereas Sunderflock clears the opposing creatures away while leaving all of our elementals intact. Next up, we have Shimmer Creep. For 4 and a black, we have a 3/5 creature elemental with Menace. It also has a vivid ability of, when this creature enters, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. So this card is similar to Elemental Spectacle in the fact that it has the vivid mechanic, which means the amount of value it provides is dependent on the amount of colors among permanents you control. Now for this particular deck, I find most of the vivid cards to be pretty inconsistent for our plan. Overall, this card is okay, but all of the other additions we are putting in the deck will just provide more value for you. And here we have Thriving Grove. It is a land that says this land enters tapped. As it enters, choose a color other than green. You can then tap it, add green, or 1 mana of the chosen color. So this deck out of the box comes with 40 lands, which is probably too many in my opinion. Not to mention, it also has a lot of lands that always enter the battlefield tapped, and this card is one of them. Lands that always enter tapped really slow us down, and we really want to be able to start chaining our elementals as early as possible. Here we have the last of our removals. We have Timeless Lotus. For 5 colorless, we have a legendary artifact. Timeless Lotus enters tapped, and you can tap it to add Wooburg. So the reason I think Timeless Lotus was likely included in this precon is because it can help pay for Ashling's second part of her ability to keep the elemental token copy. The problem is if that is what this card really is useful for, we have much easier and much better ways to effectively keep token copies of our elementals, such as Renewed Solidarity, for example, and that doesn't cost 5 mana to get on the board. On top of that, the fact that this comes into play tapped is a big deal. That means we're paying 5 mana for something that doesn't do anything the turn it comes down. In a deck that really wants to keep its tempo going, this is a big drawback. Hey everyone, I wanted to take a moment to give a huge shout out to our partner, the Mighty Meeple. If you're in or visiting the Concord, North Carolina area, the Mighty Meeple is the local game store to check out. Their team is friendly, knowledgeable, and always ready to help you find exactly what you need. From Magic and board games to minis and more, whatever your hobby, they've got you covered. And even if you're not local, no problem. You can shop for Magic singles and other TCGs at mightymeeple.com. Thank you, and now let's get back to the video. We've now made it to the no budget options portion of the video, and we're going to start off with Animar Soul of Elements. For 1 green, a blue, and a red, we have a 1/1 legendary creature elemental, protection from white and from black. Whenever you cast a creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Animar Soul of Elements. Creature spells you control cost 1 less to cast for each +1/+1 counter on Animar. So Animar is an incredible card for this deck because it can dramatically reduce the cost of our elementals. Every time we cast a creature, Animar will grow, which in turn makes all of our future creature spells cheaper. That cost reduction does include evoke costs. Since we're often trying to chain multiple elementals in a single turn, Animar can really make our explosive turns practically free to cast. On top of that, protection from white and black makes Animar difficult to remove. And in matchups against white and black decks especially, Animar can even turn into a legitimate combat threat as it continues to grow. Here we have our next no budget option, Roaming Throne, for 4 colorless. It's a 4/4 artifact creature golem that has Ward 2. As Roaming Throne enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Roaming Throne is the chosen type in addition to its other types. If a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type triggers, it triggers an additional time. So Roaming Throne is another excellent triggered ability payoff for this deck. Us naming elemental means it doubles the triggered abilities of all of our other elementals. Since this deck is built around a lot of ETB effects, that means every elemental we evoke and every token Ashling creates now triggers its abilities an additional time. Additionally, it having Ward 2 gives it a bit of built-in protection from targeted removal. And here we have the last of our no budget options. We have Solitude. For 3 and 2 white, we have a 3/2 creature elemental incarnation that has flash, lifelink, and when Solitude enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 other target creature. That creature's controller gains life equal to its power. Solitude is really one of the best interactive elementals that we can run. Due to it having flash, it gives us instant speed creature removal attached to its powerful ETB. And if we evoke this with Ashling, we're going to get another copy of it. Being able to exile 2 creatures for the price of 1 is pretty solid. It being an elemental also means it will work with any of the other trigger doubling synergies that we're adding. Now, while this most of the time will be used to exile our opponent's creatures, you'll notice that it doesn't say your opponent's creatures only, which means if you happen to have a spare high-powered elemental token just laying around, you can use this to just give yourself life gain. And there you have it. After upgrading this deck, we have a final upgrade cost of $82.39. This total does not include the no budget options that we covered. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos. I think Lorwyn Eclipse has been a really great set. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Which commanders are you building? If you want to see the Dance of the Elements deck in action, check out the video link here where you can watch me and 3 of my friends battle it out to see which commander Precon takes the victory. Until next time, thank you for watching.